lose games. But so you just kind of got used to it. But when we moved up here, I was like, hey, it's kind of weird, honey, how Sundays can be after a Saturday loss. And but over the years, I think maybe just talking about it and things like that, I always remind people Jesus is still on the throne. He is. You still have a Savior. For me, I've tried to teach my kids about things in life, like your attachment to stuff should only be to a level. We play sports, the game's over. It's actually over. It was a game. Just different things. Is there disappointment about, in self, on effort and things like that? Absolutely. But all the other stuff kind of fades away. Christ is so much more important. I always use that illustration. It's that one gift that makes all other gifts seem like, it's just something that's there. And so this morning, thank you for being here. I want to, this is the last week on family. And if you would, turn to 1 Samuel chapter number 25. There's 3 characters in 1 Samuel chapter number 25, and probably all of us can relate a little to 3 of these main characters. We're going to go through this chapter. One is David. Everybody wants to be like, oh yeah, I can relate to David, a man after God's own heart. He killed Goliath. We'll talk about some of those things. One is Abigail, just a woman of faith, godly. And one is this guy named Nabal. If we're not careful, there's some characteristics that we're going to find out about Nabal that could be in our marriages, in our homes. I'll just tell you something heavy on my heart. As a pastor now, I've served in ministry for 23 years now. But if I had to count, 90% of my counseling that I've done as a minister has always been marriage counseling. It has. There's little to other counseling that happens. Not that there shouldn't be. There probably should be people who come to you for other reasons. But I would say 90% of, in 23 years, all the counseling, all the times, there's been some tie to that. Probably if I talk to people about some of their biggest struggles in life, it would be tied to marriage. And I would tell you, there's nobody in here, if someone's like, my marriage is perfect, we never have problems, I'm like, let me ask your spouse. All right, because some of us are delusional. All right, and we live in a delusional world. You're like, yeah, it's a dream for her. She's married to me. But it was the first relationship that God created. A man and a woman. That relationship takes preeminence of your physical earthly relationships. It takes preeminence over all other relationships. It is your most important. It is more important than parent and child relationship. Because if that relationship is messed up, it messes up that other relationship. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, this and this. I'm not talking in care. My wife and I, we'll go without so our kids can have. I'm not talking that children should ever be neglected. But that me and mom's relationship is the most important relationship. Listen about this marriage. Actually, you're going to see 2 marriages here. It says in verse number 1, 1 Samuel chapter 25, and Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him and buried him in the house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there was a man in Mon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great. I want you to think about this man. This man is very great only in one way: the stuff he has. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. Here's what a blessing this man has. He has a wife who has good understanding. She's wise. I believe if you just read the story, she's godly. And not only is she a wise, godly wife, but she has a beautiful countenance. Now I want to tell you, this is different than just outward beauty. She had a beautiful countenance. I've been just going through like a lot of books, and one of these books just talking about being a likable person. 50% of it is your face and your reactions, just how you smile and look at people. I believe she had a countenance of beauty that was external. It just didn't mean she was just beautiful. It just meant the kind of person she was. She was sweet and kind, gracious. And this man Nabal, it says, but the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. Now you're going to bring this other guy into this story. Verse number 4, and David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep, and David sent out 10 young men, and David said unto the young men, get you up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. Now, I'm just going to paraphrase just some of this for you, the rest of this. Basically, what has happened here in this story so far is, here is Nabal, and he has his property and all his stuff, and David's men have been running from King Saul, and so David's men and warriors are all around his property. And now for for a season and a time, David's men have been protecting them. They have been if an animal or a wild animal would come and try to take the sheep, his men would protect the shepherds. They protected all the land that was around them. And so what Nabal is collecting now is very blessed because David and his men were there. Now David he's at a point where he needs some help. And so he's going to go to Nabal, and he's sending these men. He said, hey, send them in the name that David needs some help. Now, if everybody in that area knows David's going to be the next king. And listen to what Nabal says to him. Verse number 10, 1 Samuel 25, verse number 10. And Nabal, David's servant, said, who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? For some reason, I can't get this out of my mind. He's like, who are you talking to? Who do you think you are? I mean, he has this attitude of I don't care, and I don't care who you are. There are servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Shall I take then my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed for my shears, and give it unto the men whom I know not whence they be? So David's young men returned to him, and David is a man of war. So he's ticked off. He's like, I'm going to take care of Nabal. We'll just go up there, and I'm going to kill everybody in Nabal's family. I am just ticked that this guy, now I just want to tell you, it's probably not the right response, okay? Every time you get mad, it probably is not the right response. Hey, I'm going to go over to their house and I'm going to beat them down, all right? A lot of us had Thanksgiving, and some of our family members we feel that way about, all right? David didn't have the right response. So he's going to go over there, and then here comes this woman into this picture. She's a godly woman. She's a special woman. It says in verse 14, she hears about David coming, or hears about what Nabal did, and it says this: "But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, 'Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields.'" I mean, the men come to Abigail and tell her what's happened. Why? Because she's the person of reason in the relationship. She's the person with understanding in this relationship. It happens in my home sometimes. Like, Kathy's like, "Hey, calm down. This is probably not that big of an issue." Now, I do want to tell you that I feel like within husbands and wives, it's like somewhat of a double standard where a wife can say, "Calm down." If you've ever been a man, you never tell a woman to calm down. Just calm down. That's like fighting words for a woman. I don't know why, but I just want to throw it out there for all the women here. Like, calm down is not a bad thing, all right? But she's the woman of understanding, and so this is sad. She has to go behind his back and make things right. She has to go behind his back, and sometimes I think of people as a Nabal. I'm like, they're a Nabal. And we'll find out about this, but they can't be reasoned with. She has to come back behind his back. She comes to David. It says in verse 18, she made haste and took food and things and took it to David. And she sends her servants ahead. Verse 21, David's saying, hey, nothing's been missed. It says in verse 23, "And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground." So here comes this wife, and she comes and she's begging, "Hey, don't do anything to this Nabal." Listen what she has to say about him, verse 25. "Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial." She's literally saying this man is of the devil. He's evil in his doings. He's wicked. Sometimes your character and how you treat people is literally just evil. It's evil how sometimes in marriages, like, we will treat this person that we made a covenant with, that we made a promise to love, to cherish, that will become, of all the people in the world, it's crazy to me, you make a covenant with someone, and that person becomes your enemy when you're in marriage. I just want to tell you, that was never God's plan. It was never God's plan for this to be that type of marriage. I do want you to just see some things. Abigail is a woman of grace. She comes back and tells Nabal about this. And she gets a big blessing. He dies. All right, I'm just like, you're like, Some of you are like, I just want to be an Abigail. If your wife today starts saying, I just want to be like Abigail, I would be a little worried, all right? But he does. God sees what's going on in the world. Like, he sees what's going on in your family. He sees what's going on in your life, your heart, your marriage. And this was how he's shown grace to Abigail. Nabal wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to be a different man. He was selfish and wicked, and he dies, and David's like, man, that lady was a good lady. She was a godly lady. And then Abigail becomes, it says in verse number 40, and when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife. Now, there's a whole problem here with David, and we'll talk about some of those problems that are created, because like sometimes you think like, hey, here's Abigail is going to have some problems in David's family also. All right, every family, every relationship has conflict, but I'm sure she was thanking God all the days of her life. I'm not with Nabal anymore. She marries David, and we go on with this story. I just want to give you some some things about this story. It says about Nabal, just some cautionary examples. His character had no fruit, so it nourished their relationship in no way. He was a man who was about himself, and we're gonna define this one word that the Bible uses. And I think if you don't read the Bible with a dictionary, if you want to find somewhere you don't have to ever pick up a dictionary, you just lose so much to the Bible. And we're going to read what this word curlish means. Abigail, you see that she is a peacemaker. God always blesses peacemakers. You will find that just throughout the Bible. There is just something special about those who make for peace. And then you see David, the value of restraint. That he didn't just go and kill and just wipe all those people out. The value that David had, he chose forgiveness, he chose patience. For a while he was going to be impulsive. Now, I just want to give you a thing. This one definition could preach a whole message. Caleb, if you would put that word up there. There's this word, it's called curlish. I mean, I use it all the time. I don't know about you guys. I'm like, oh, that person's curlish. Obviously, we don't use this word often. But when I looked it up in the dictionary, I thought, this describes some people. This describes what goes on in some people's marriages. Nabal was curlish. And look at the definition of curlish. Rude. Do you know in my years of like dealing with people and situations, I see people and I'm like, I wouldn't talk to my dog like that. Now, I would never have a dog. But I wouldn't, if I had one, I wouldn't talk to it like that. It is amazing to me that the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, but you would speak to them so rudely. He was rude. Here's some other words. I was like, I have no idea what surly means or sullen. Gloomily crabbed. Is that in by his marriage? Crabbed. Snarling. Sternly sour. sullen, gloomily angry, silent, affected with ill humor. You're getting in, like danger zones, like when some of these, like I like to be sarcastic. But you have to be like careful with sarcasm when you're using it within your relationships and it has truth. You're just hurting one another. You're just cutting one another. And so it's supposed to be. Nabal was selfish, narrow-minded. And then I was like, what in the world is this? Covetous, greedy of gain. He was a selfish man. He didn't care about his wife. He didn't care about the people around him. All he could focus on was himself. Sometimes this happens within marriages. Unyielding, harsh, obstinate, stubborn. You just see these characteristics in Nabal. And then you think about Abigail, how sweet she was, a peacemaker. And your heart just breaks for her. I have 2 daughters, and I think about, one day them getting married, and I'm like, God, please, don't let them marry a Nabal. Don't let them marry a selfish, self-willed, angry, stubborn man. Let them marry someone like Jesus. Let them marry someone who is Christ-like, who is filled with love and grace. You start thinking about some of these things, and especially as your kids get older, and you think about how some of these things like taint and like destroy marriages. I want to give you just something else about Nabal. Nabal didn't want to help. David had done all this stuff for him, and he didn't want to help. I think about this with Jesus. If you're a Christian man in here and you're claiming you are Christ-like, Jesus was willing to wash people's feet. There shouldn't be anything that we're not willing to do or to help. Now, I just want to tell you this. I 100% believe that God designed us with roles within our marriages. That He designed men to serve a certain role, and He designed women to serve a certain role. But I can't see, the picture of a Christ-like man in a marriage that he doesn't serve his family. Nabal didn't care about serving his family. It was about him. You can be guaranteed if Nabal comes home, life should center around him. His wants, his desires, whatever he wants in life. I just want to tell you, some of these characteristics are in all of us. They are, if we're honest. The ladies that are here, you could be a female Nabal. That sounds like a cuss word. But you could be just there. Selfish and stubborn because it's got to be about you. Things have to go your way. I see this one word that came up in that about Kurlish was not yielding. that you couldn't yield. You see Abigail, her role as a peacemaker. This could be either side in your relationship, that one of you is a peacemaker. I have some side notes about there's a characteristic of another characteristic that I pray for my daughter's future husband, and I see this in Nabal. He was able to accumulate riches and things, but I've tried to teach my kids this. If somebody could call you something horrible, it's this word: lazy. It should be a shame for any Christian, for anybody to think that we are lazy, whether it's at work or at home. That it is like it should like grate on you if someone even thinks that you're lazy. It's shameful to me to think of the preachers who have given pastoring a bad name, where they're like, pastors are lazy. They have time to golf and do all kinds of things, all the things that they can do. That's the picture that I get of Nabal. He wants all of his and all of his stuff. And then this word comes up. He's lazy. Thinking about this, you see this woman, she moves with grace, with wisdom. She goes out of her way to work and to, make situations right. She's like a negotiator. And then you see this David in this story. He's patient. She comes to him and Abigail speaks wisdom to him. And she is patient. I want to just talk about just a few things. One, I want to tell you, divorce happens, and Jesus knew that divorce was going to happen. The Pharisees came to him and they're like, well, what about divorce? I just want to tell you, it is not God's plan, but it does happen. And I do want to tell you this. It is not the unforgivable sin. It is not, it's not even always one person. It can be another person. There has to be two people in a relationship. It's not like, hey, I've gotten divorced now. Now life is over. In this story, she goes from Nabal to David. I just want to tell you, God is gracious. He is. Now, I do want to tell you this. Everybody, you always think the grass is greener. Just the perspective from your yard. The grass is greener in your neighbor's yard because he fertilizes it, all right? It's not because it's like different grass or anything like that. And so I just want to tell you, there's a lot of things, but I want to just give you this picture. Her life didn't become perfect because she married David. Do you know some things about David's family? The sword never departed from his house. He watched his sons get killed. One of them killed one of the other ones. Went through trials where he got cast out of the city and had to be on the run again. She never got to get the picture of hey, here's this perfect marriage with this white picket fence. It's work. Marriages are made up of broken people. I just want to tell you, if your expectation of marriage or your spouse is that they're going to be like these perfect people, they're not. There's going to be hurt. There's going to be pain. But I think I see this. Romans 8:1, for those who have have faced that and the impact on our kids and the people that it touches. Romans 8:1 says this, there is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus. He's a forgiving God, and there's no condemnation. There's no condemnation for me. My heart breaks in those situations. I want to just give you just this thought, because sometimes people ask me about abuse in marriage. Ephesians 5:28 says this, so ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. There can be situations where people are caught up in abusive relationships. They're always like, well, Pastor Mike, should they divorce? I'm against divorce unless there's, a few biblical things that could be. But sometimes there has to be separation. I would never tell someone to stay in a home or somewhere where they were being abused. That doesn't mean you can't leave that situation. And I want to tell you this. There's physical abuse where people are afraid. And if you are a man who physically abuses a woman, shame on you, and may God judge you for that. But in our day and age, I see what goes on a lot of times is emotional abuse that happens in families. It goes both ways. In our culture today, it's so messed up that there's women who are physically trying to abuse their husband. It's hard for me to imagine, all right? But I mean, I guess you could be in that situation. The Bible would never teach I don't think Abigail was in this home and she was getting beat. But I do believe this. She stuck it out in a home that it wasn't good. She stuck it out in a home that I'm sure she had days where she was like, this is horrible. Not days. I bet she lived every day like that. But you know what? There was a God of grace who, he took care of all of it. Somehow, in what I preached at or spoke at Trey and Katie's wedding was don't forget prayer. God cares more about your marriage than you do. If He has power to create everything, He can do miraculous things. One, He can give you grace and patience that is unbelievable. He can change things. In the home I grew up in, this was the thought growing up, from our teenage years. My mom and dad would tell us, when you guys get out of school, we're going to get a divorce, all right? And I didn't live in this picture perfect home all the time, even though we always want to think about the good old days and how everything was perfect. And they would tell us that. And then me and my brother moved out. And they had the sweetest marriage. So the problem was me and my brother, all right? Their marriage just changed. It became so sweet. They're going on dates. And I was like, I thought you guys were done with this. And they're like, no, we're happier than we've ever been. And there's a million reasons for all that. One of the things that changed my mom and dad's marriage was my dad got saved. My mom knew Christ, and God is gracious. He changed my dad. He changed my mom. He changed the home we live in. And I want to just give you this. 1 Corinthians 13:7 says, love endureth all things. And it's speaking of charity. Charity endureth all things. This love for others. In our marriage, there needs to be perseverance. There's effort required in marriage. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." You think about some things in life, like you will train for a job, you will train for a sport if you're on a sport team. Some of you, whatever maybe what you're into in life, you will train for, you will work so hard. But the most important relationship you have in life, you won't prepare for that. There should be like a boot camp for marriage. You should have to go through like a boot camp for both men and women. Like, hey, and these are things that we need to train, that we need to do. I will tell you this: for anybody who is getting married, they find that people who go through a biblical premarital counseling, the statistics of their marriages lasting are way higher than other people, because they're teaching things like, hey, this needs to be in place in your marriage. If you didn't go through those, it's not like, hey, I'm in trouble. No, you can still learn those things and begin to apply them. Don't be a Nabal. Be willing to change. Realize who you are and the characteristics that are in your life. That, hey, I need to change. And then I think about this, that how many times did Abigail have to just seek God's? He says this in Philippians 4:19, "But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches." You think about this, how many times did she have to pray and say, God, I need you. I need you to supply this need. And then this last thing about marriage, I've been going through some books, and I want to go through some secular books to see what they say. And there was this one thing that came out, and it's a biblical principle. It's funny to me when the secular world takes a biblical principle and they're like, hey, I just want to teach you this. I'm like, yeah, I read that in the Bible. That's the best book if you want a book to read. But I thought it would just be interesting to see what. And there was these two things that if you want a good marriage and a good home, it is love and respect. The Bible calls it reverence. It is a special kind of respect. There was a man, he wrote a book, and he was he could meet with someone, he could meet with a couple for 5 minutes and tell them if their marriage was going to last within just one counseling setting. And statistically, he was out of this world in predicting them. And it was funny, the one predictor that he used, it was hey, if there was more negative stuff, you thought more negatively about your spouse than the positive, that he just would mark it down, it's just not going to last. You know what it was? They didn't reverence one another. They're not respecting one another. And within a home, if you don't have reverence and respect and hey, I'm gonna lift the Bible clearly teaches that in our homes, in our marriages, there's supposed to be this thing of respect and love. That we're willing to lay our lives down for one another. And so you see this in this story of Nabal and Abigail and David, all of these characteristics. This verse comes to mind in thinking about reconciling Ephesians 4:32. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. We must be forgivers. It must be, here's love and respect, and then we forgive one another. That some people, if you went over your fights are historical. Some of you could remember, and you'll bring up things somebody did to you 30 years ago. You remember when you forgot my birthday 30 years ago. I just forget them every year for Kathy. So like her short-term memory can cover up. But remember when you did this? Remember when you said this? There was no forgiveness. You took something that someone did and you just put it in your back pocket to use for later. There was no grace to like cover it, to pour over it. When you have forgiveness in a home, it's like a healing ointment. It's like this thing like that. I mean, it just like heals things. It not only heals the person you're forgiving, it heals you. And so if you want a sweet marriage, there has to be forgiveness. Why focus so much on marriage? One, it was the first institution God created. It's important. It is the building block of your family is your marriage. It is the building block of this church. Churches are built out of families. If we don't have strong marriages, how are we going to serve Jesus? The Bible says that we are one flesh. We've got to get these things right. I know there's young men and young ladies here. You're like, preacher, why do I need to know about this? So you can be prepared for the future and you can be praying for the right person in the future. You need to be looking for a Nabal and say, hey, I want to run as far as I can away from him. He had riches, he had stuff. You know, in this world, you see this stuff, you see it online, that the number one thing that people are looking for, I hope he just has a really good job, and you'll be miserable. Hope he has a lot of stuff. If that's what you're seeking for, you probably are going to find someone like Nabal. You're like, preacher, should I look for someone poor? I don't know. I'm not saying you should just look for someone godly. You should look for someone who has some character. It should focus how you look for the future. And then there's just a sweet thing when God brings beauty to a marriage. This is the other thing why I think marriage is so important. The Bible says that our marriages picture Christ and the church. It's a testimony to the world. Your marriage is a testimony to others about Jesus Christ. We have to remember that. And so it's so important that we say, hey, let's have right relationships. Let's have relationships that honor God. Let's bow our heads here.